Hello, welcome to our weekly devotions. I'm Pastor David Schoob at Trinity Lutheran Church in West Bend. It's always a joy to spend a few minutes with you and think on what God is calling us to. And this month we're talking about how God is calling us to change. And I think it's especially interesting sometimes to think about God and change. And so we read two scripture verses today. The first is from the book of James, chapter 1, verse 17. Where it says, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change." But on the other hand, we read in the book of Jonah, the 3rd chapter, verse 10, "When God saw what they did, how they turned from their evil ways, God changed his mind about the calamity that he had said he would bring upon them, and he did not do it." Two passages, and each speaks about change and God in a slightly different light. The first passage seems to run along the lines of philosophy and theology for hundreds of years. God is the unmoved mover, the basic foundation of everything that has no change. God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I think this understanding of God is one that we cling to because we want the assurance that what we understand about God will always be the same, and so that we can do the things that will make God happy. We don't want changing understandings because then we're not sure what we should do. But maybe we shouldn't worry so much about how do we appease our God, because the truth is, the one thing that's constant is God's love. And so there's no need to constantly be trying to figure out how to appease an angry or wrathful God. So for many of these words of Jonah, however, then become kind of confusing. God changes his mind. I don't think God does change God's mind. But I invite you to consider that maybe the two passages together give us a much deeper and fuller understanding of God and a deeper appreciation of the relationship that we have with God. Let me offer you a very human perspective. Chris and I have been married for about 44 years now. In that time, our love for one another has remained constant. In fact, it's probably even grown deeper. But how that love is expressed and lived out in our life together is constantly changing, because we're constantly responding to the reality that is around us. We change as the people who we love's needs change, and the struggles for life are constantly different. So though the basic understanding of who we are together remains constant, and maybe even that doesn't remain constant, because as I said, I think it deepens over time. There is change. The truth is that relationship is constantly changing and changing aspects of those who live in relationship. Time itself offers change and growth and renewal. I remember a couple coming to me once when they were struggling with their marriage, and the man suddenly said, "Well, this isn't the same person I married." And I wanted to say, well, duh. People change over time. Relationship is constant in its foundation, but the reality of it is constantly changing. So if our relationship with God, if it is relationship, and I think people forget that. We try to make God about certain knowledge or certain things we're supposed to do, but really the reality of how we live with God is about a relationship. And in that relationship, God is constant in love, maybe even growing deeper in love with us constantly. In fact, love is the very heart of the being of God, we believe as Christians, or so it seems to me, as I have lived in relationship with God throughout my life. But I experience changing ways in which God touches me with that love. When I was a child, I suppose I primarily saw God as a parent who sometimes punished me, but I guess always loved me. It wasn't a very comfortable relationship all the time. And then I perceived God as a general who gave me orders and liked me as long as I followed all the orders that were given. Then I began to experience God more as a friend, someone who walked along with me, who held me, who kept me. And then it grew into an experience of God as pure love, far beyond anything that I could understand, but knowing that God loved me and would hold me in the midst of all things. And day by day is constantly calling me to change and grow and let that love be made new in me each and every day. I experience God through different people in different moments with different visions of the reality of the love that I share with God. Let me offer you two different images of encounters with God from the same person, Mike Yaconelli. He wrote both of these in his book, Dangerous Wonder. The first one goes like this. I had retreated to the Oregon coast to be alone. The questions of my faith were draining the life out of me, and I desperately needed solitude. One afternoon, I took a walk to the edge of the Oregon coast. The sky was dark and menacing, the wind strong and wild, the water crashing against the rocks, chaotic and deafening, thunderous. There I stood, inches away from the life-threatening water, and I was frightened. Yet I was covered with a gentle mist, soothing my soul and silently awakening me to a presence. There God was, in the eye of the stormy waters, asking me to come to God. God's gentleness was only perceptible because of the roaring waters around me. Give me a Jesus who meets me in the rushing, crashing waters of my questions. Let me stand precariously close to the dark and menacing skies of doubt, so I can hear the fierce and gentle, loving voice of my Jesus, who draws out my fears and stands just beyond my questions with open arms. The second image goes like this. My office was a mess with reference books strewn over the entire surface of my desk, my couch, and my floor. After about 2 hours, I began to sense the presence of God in my study. It was a very unusual experience for me, but at the same time, very real. It was as though He was playing with me. I went to the computer and wrote down my experience as it was happening. I sit in my room this morning playing hide and seek with God, enjoying the seeking as much as the finding, catching glimpses of my Father smiling, darting from one book to another, hiding in my mind. Suddenly God is standing there in my thoughts, laughing, escaping my grasp, only to turn up on the page of my notes. As I gather my notes, my Bibles, my books to prepare this talk, I find my soul overflowing with gratitude, with the tears of joy because God and I have just spent 2 hours together, just God and I playing with truth. And I leave my study with a strange understanding that I did not find God, but God found me. Sometimes our experience of God is a God who is playful and joyous. Sometimes God comes amidst the crashes of life with a gentle touch. God may even come demanding of us sometimes, and maybe even a little upset. God may come as teacher or as close friend. It depends on our need, and God is willing to come to us in the way that meets the need that's deep in our hearts. God is willing to change so that we can experience God's love. Here's something for you to meditate on through this week. Rather than a prayer today, I want to just leave you with this meditation. This is from Rebecca Blaine Harding Davis. It says, "We are all of us from birth to death, guests at a table which we did not spread. The sun, the earth, love, friends, our very breath are part of the banquet. Shall we think of the day as a chance to come nearer to our host and to find out something of God who has fed us for so long?" Take some time through the week to just be open to the possibility of God's coming and realize that God comes to us in so many changing ways, because at the very heart, God is love. Have a good week.